This is The Backstory with Omobola Stephen. It's a balanced, objective, unbiased and disruptive conversation on government and politics. We shine more light on what has not worked and what would make it work. And now, to the finest, personable and engaging host extraordinaire, Omobola Stephen. Tune in.
Good to have you on The Backstory with Omobola Stephen. On The Backstory, we like to shine more light on what has not worked and what will make it work. We focus on government and politics, with other subtopics like science and technology, society and culture, and the environment. Now, on today's show, I have Daryl Constantine, who is running for the president of the United States of America in 2024. Welcome to The Backstory, Daryl Constantine.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me back. It's very nice to see you.
Very nice to see you once again, Daryl, and thanks for joining me on the show. We'll be talking about the U.S. and Africa alliance, also talking about your political ambition going forward. Now, talking about the U.S.-Africa alliance, the U.S. believes that it's time to stop treating Africa as a subject of geopolitics, and we should start treating it as a major geopolitical player. It has become, this was the President Joe Biden's message to African Union summits participants on February 4, 2021. So what's your take on this?
Well, I think I agree largely, in large part. What I would say to the Biden administration is that there's just still a lot of tone-deaf aspects to that messaging coming from them, especially on the social perspective. There's still a lot of condescension on things like pushing LBGT on children and things like that, which, I know Africa is a strong leader on the social front and look forward to working with you guys on. But I absolutely agree. I mean, there's so many exciting, beautiful things coming out of and going on in Africa. So I share that sentiment. I think I would kind of tweak my messaging a little bit because I think it's a little bit disingenuous when you're saying something like that, while at the same time, you're still kind of bullying a certain set of values that really don't resonate in Africa or really anywhere else in the world. And I would also say that the United States isn't the only nation or part of the world that's trying to align further with Africa. So I think that there's some competition there as well. I know that Russia is interested in the region as well as the Middle East. So I think that if the United States, if we don't modernize our view on the sort of human rights issues and things of that topic, if we don't sort of course correct, I think there's actually an opportunity that there could be a miss there. So certainly as president, that's something that I would echo that, but my message would be, I think, a little bit more genuine, because I think we're going to find that there's a lot more compatibility on the social front dealing with someone such as myself running to make the country Christian again, trying to reorient the nation and geopolitics around that sort of traditional Christian set of values.
All right. So why do you think Africa is very important to the U.S.?
Well, I mean, I think it's important for the world in general, for all of the continents to be doing well, right? I mean, the world is very global now, so we are very much connected. And that is something that's happened as a result of the internet. And there's some negatives that people see to that, but there's also a positive to that. So, everybody coming together, we kind of want that. We want all of the nations, all of the continents standing on their own and kind of contributing their voice in a healthy way, because we do know that when there's war, when there's strife, when there's chaos, that's felt all across the world. You look at the war in Ukraine as an example. Everybody's bleeding from that. Certainly, I don't mean to equate maybe bleeding is the right term, because there is actual blood on the soil in Ukraine. So I don't want to equate that, but we're all feeling it. We're feeling the effects of it. And I think that to think that we could sort of leave a continent and allow it to struggle with so many of the things that historically Africa has struggled with, and that would be okay, and that we wouldn't feel the impacts of that. I think that there's some immaturity there, and I think that it's certainly true. And then there's a pushback here of, well, what about us? And that's very true too, because the United States is in a very poor state right now. I mean, our roads are atrocious. I mean, my car, I just got new tires 6 months ago, and I already got flats. I need to get a new set and everything. There's just basic things. Our country is kind of going down. So there's concern here about, hey, let's focus on us too. I don't think that it's one or the other. I don't believe in a zero-sum game. I think that we can encourage positive growth and development, but there's a lot of innovation. There's just a lot of beautiful things culturally, artistically, even from the technological perspective. really good things going on, and such an important continent to the history of the world that all of us sort of share into that. So, I mean, I don't really, I think it's kind of self-evident how and why we would want that partnership. But again, it's important that the United States stop lecturing on things that don't resonate. And we have to go back to being on the same page, because it doesn't really add up. We want to come over and help and assist, but then we also are pushing these very bizarre things that I think you know what I'm talking about. These very bizarre lifestyles, and tying them to terms like inclusivity and inclusivity in teaching degenerate lifestyles to children. Those are not compatible words. These are not the same things. So we kind of tie them together and we go, oh, here, take this and all that. So let's kind of move some of that sort of I don't want to say goofy, I don't want to say evil stuff. Let's take that out and let's really focus on working together to develop both continents simultaneously and working forward on the places where we're compatible.
All right. So now, talking about working on places we are compatible. So what step do you think that the US can take to help in Americans' future, in Africa's future? I beg your pardon. Let me ask the question again. What step do you think that can help the US go all in on Africa's future?
Wait, what are you asking me? How Africa can help US, or how US can help Africa?
Yes. So yes, how do you think the US can go all in on Africa's future?
Well, one thing I would really like, I'd like for everybody to play more soccer. And Africa is coming up in the soccer world. I like to see North America come up too. We have Messi here. The last World Cup was a very beautiful thing. You see how that sort of brings the world together. So I wanted to see everybody get more on the same page, go back to kind of having fun and connecting and seeing more about the things that we have in common than our differences. Now, economically, there's a lot of resources out of Africa, but we want to protect those also. We want to protect the ivory of elephants and things like that. We want to be protecting these things, but at the same time, working and moving forward together. Does that make sense?
It sure does. Now, do you think that the US Africa policy, do you really think they need a reset? What's your
opinion? Oh, yeah. Well, we need a total reset on all of our geopolitical relations, because we've been operating with an inverted moral compass. I'll say that a little bit slowly because I have probably a funny accent on your side. We have an inverted moral compass that we've been projecting. So we need a complete reset. We need to just go, okay, this negative stuff has got to go. We lose track of good things like stopping wars, protecting poverty, protecting people from, not having food and water, when we tie it to things that I think everybody knows is wrong. And it creates a lot of confusion. You're looking at it and go, what is this thing that's coming over here? Is it helpful or is it not? And it actually ends up harboring resentment, because what you see is as those seeds come up, people start looking around at their countries and they start seeing that actually a lot of this stuff they don't really like, and they miss the roots of their country. So that reset, I think, yes, certainly with Africa, but I would say that reset applies across the board. It applies to the Middle East, it applies to Eastern Europe, it applies to Western Europe, where I want to be applying pressure. It's a reversal, because right now the pressure is, hey, come be more inclusive of these types of things. And in my case, it's no, hey, come be more protective of children. Come with us to be more protective of children. And if you don't start protecting your children, we're going to start putting pressure on you. So it kind of flips the switch, while keeping in place the obvious things that we know, that we can't have another world war. Yeah, and that's really where the globalism comes from. People lose track of that because globalism has become something that's considered very negative. But the basic thing is, we had that world war, we dropped the nuclear bombs, we can't do that again, because there won't be a fourth one after that. So we got to figure out how to work together, how to maintain the peace. And we've sort of done that, but the values have become twisted along the way. So now what we have is, we have maybe more physical safety by and large, still certainly pockets of war, and we need to continue to remove those. But really now it's a spiritual danger that has just exacerbated, really just gone off the charts, because we have so many access points for demons into the homes of children, women, men, everybody. The phone, everything that we operate out of, is a great tool. But if we don't do a better job of protecting what comes through on it, we've got all sorts of room for demonic activities, and we've got demons running wild. So, I mean, that's all going on parallel, and that's something that has to be addressed. And the United States, unfortunately, is sort of the hub, the epicenter of that demonic activity. It comes out of Hollywood. It comes out of our entertainment industry. So, I mean, one of the things is when we see art come from other parts of the world, that's very helpful. It's very helpful when meaningful art comes forward from places like Africa, places like Russia, places like the Middle East, because that contributes to a new paradigm when you hear new voices. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we've been selling in our movies, they're actually not things that people like. They just go, okay, that's Star Wars. I better go buy it. I better go see this. I don't really like it. It's not doing for me what it used to, but I'll just go and grumble about it. Here's my $16. But when people start going back to real stories, real traditions, real things that resonate, that stuff kind of moves further and further away. And I think that that can happen very quickly. And part of this, now I'm going to shift and talk to citizens of my country. There's a real danger, and I think it's going to happen. That you're already seeing that. You're already seeing nations peel out of this little clique of Western European nations and this little bizarre set of values that we created 30 or 40 years ago. They're going, yeah, we don't want this stuff. We're just going to talk to nations. We're going to talk to China. We'll talk to Africa. We'll talk to Russia. We'll talk to these other. We don't really necessarily want this stuff. And eventually, people are going to sit back. The United States going to start huffing and puffing, and then they're going to realize you're not doing anything. We're not backed financially. We don't have, the dollar is no longer strong, and everything is just completely collapsed. The United States can be left on the outside looking in, which is what's going to happen if we're going to continue to try and bully with these sort of weird values. So we need to shape up. We need to modernize, certainly on the social front. We need to get on the same page with the tempo of the world. And I talk about something like football. I call it, football is what I call it. And I called it soccer earlier. So just to clarify for your audience, know what I'm talking about. Sounds like kind of a silly thing, but it's actually not. I mean, this was something, this is a little bit of Constantine trivia. In 1994, I went to 2 World Cup games. I saw Nigeria play twice. I saw them play at Diego Maradona's last game, and I saw them play when Roberto Baggio had his famous brace. And just being at the World Cup and seeing the way that the world came together and seeing this tempo of just kicking the ball around, and just what a beautiful thing that was. And that was always my dream as a kid. I always wanted to be a pro football player. Didn't work out because I got lazy and got into bad stuff when I was in high school. So now I'm trying like my second thing here, which is to be president of the United States, which I think would be an acceptable consolation prize. But we want to get back to that. We want to get back to that, celebrating our differences, not turning everything necessarily into one big strip mall where everything looks and feels exactly the same, but everybody coming together and playing in a fun way, but while still being ourselves, still expressing our diversity or differences, and our neat multiculturalism. And that was, and there's a lot of resentment now in my country to things like multiculturalism, and it's because it's been sort of weaponized. But when I was a kid, I mean, what this was about, and it was probably being emphasized with the intent to weaponize. But is this idea of, hey, let's all come to class and talk about something that matters to our family. This is a quilt that means something to my family, or this is a food that means something to my family. And isn't that great? And learning from each other. And I think we want to go back to that spirit of learning from each other and coming together, but at the same time, not to the point of just eroding and erasing culture, which is really a very big concern that's happening all over the place, is that there's an erasure of culture. Especially look at Europe. Europe's culture has been devastated. This has placed thousands of years of culture. The United States, a very young nation. I don't really get very upset about it. We're talking about a couple hundred years relative to a place like Africa or Europe. This is very, very deep roots. And we really, as humanity, we don't want to lose those things. We want to keep those. We want to respect those. We want to honor those while integrating into some of these great new technologies that we have that enable us to learn and better ourselves in a much faster capacity, which I always talk about. Like I say, I'm jealous. I watch the kids today with football. They've got all these training videos on Instagram. You can just sit there on Instagram and just learn all these new tricks. And I go, oh my gosh, if I could, I mean, the ability to just boom, 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 pick things up quicker instead of like, when I was a kid, it was like my dad tracked down some training videos from like a library in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And it was like this, big thing. Now kids are just on there. Then there was a kid, Enzo, that I played with, and he was on a team that I played. He was one of the best players I ever played with. And he started playing when he was 14. He just taught himself how to play by watching videos. And he was just like incredible. So I always think about that, the ability to rapidly accelerate our learning and our ability to improve ourselves. But at the same time, we've got to protect on that front because it's so invasive, it's so everywhere, it is so easy for people to put other messages in. And right now, what we've really done is we've given demons unfettered access to society at large, most specifically children. And that's really the number one responsibility of men. We have to protect women. You guys, we got to protect you guys. We got to protect the kids from demonic activity. And we've done a terrible job of that. So first and foremost, the nations have to turn back towards God. And geopolitically, that would be certainly what I would be looking to do as president. I'd be looking to reorient and point not only the United States, but then all of the other nations in that direction. And so, you might not know this, but my church, I'm Orthodox, has a very large presence in Africa, in parts of Africa. And they actually have the oldest copy of the Bible, apparently. And it says that's what they say in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And I've actually gone to Ethiopian Orthodox Church, very beautiful. So there is a lot of common ground and connection, not only with Christians across the world, but also Muslims, all people of the Abrahamic faith. We all kind of start from that same place. We all have the same understanding of what sin is and what sin does to a society. We also understand, because all three of us are kind of tied into the Old Testament, we all understand what the consequence and really what the necessity is to blight out sin. And I think what the Christian world has to offer is compassion, grace, and forgiveness. And that we're able to keep that without, stoning these things out of existence, without throwing them off of a building. But we have to not get disordered to the point where we actually start promoting sin, because that is a very demonic misinterpretation. And it's an abuse of the very deep and beautiful gift of Christ to the world, which is that forgiveness, that we can get on our knees and say that we're sorry. And if we don't, if we abuse that gift, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose it. And we're going to have to end up going back to a much more brutal form of tribalism that sort of is the natural consequence and byproduct of rampant social chaos, which doesn't last. We don't get the feminist utopia for 700 years. It doesn't happen. Eventually, barbaric attitudes are going to just come in and subdue everything and just take all the bad stuff and just smack it out. So I don't think we want to go back in that direction. We want to keep this peace. We want to keep this positivity, warmth, and this beautiful age of Christ that we've been in. And of course, it's all in God's hands. So it's kind of silly talking about these things if we have control over it. But we shouldn't want these things. We want to be on the right side of these things. We want to be keeping that morality, keeping that empathy, keeping that compassion and love, but not going into the other direction, which is where we're at now, where we're now teaching children that sin is good. We're teaching children that to resist sin is bad. We're, again, completely inverted moral compass. And I don't think Africa wants that. I don't think that the Middle East wants that. I don't think that Eastern Europe wants that.
You don't think that Africa wants that, Daryl. So what do you think are the new and emerging challenges that is facing Africa? And how will your administration? Now, we're still talking about Africa here. You know that it has its own challenges. What are the new and emerging challenges that is facing Africa today? And how will your own administration tackle them if you become the president of the United States?
Well, I can answer very broadly. Generally, I can talk about poverty and war and things like that I hear about. I think it would actually be better for you to tell me about some of the concerns of Africa. I'd like to hear from you because you know much more about it than me. It's a pop quiz. I'm not going to have anything. I'm not going to have any level of insight on it that would match yours. So I think it'd be better. I would actually prefer to kind of hear from you so that I can have some things to think about. Maybe I can give some responses, but maybe it's just some things for me to think about. So, I mean, what are from your perspective in Africa, what are some of your biggest concerns? What are some things that you would like to see improved in relations with the U.S.?
Yes, we talk about, concerned, Africa is concerned about security. It's concerned about health, right? We have a lot of insecurity issues globally, especially in Africa. We also have health issues that is really worrisome. And infrastructure is also a major issue. And we also have the issue of war, famine, that is also affecting most Africans. So I would like you, if we're talking about the US and Africa Alliance, I would like you to shed more light on how your own administration can address these salient issues.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, war. We've got to put out the wars. We've got to stop that stuff. We've got to end the racial enmity and strife. We've got to come together on that stuff, and then we've got to invest in health. We've got to invest in disease control and these types of things. And these stuff, a lot of the stuff is going on in Africa. So, it's important that we learn to combat these things. It's good for everybody. You don't want to let diseases run rampant. It's good to improve our readiness to deal with things. And we see how unready we were for something like COVID, which caught a lot of people off guard. And we didn't do a very good job with that. And just a number of different fronts. The whole thing with the vaccine was a disaster. A lot of people have, doubts about it. I myself, I never got the vaccine. I didn't have need to. I own my own business, young, healthy guy. And I said, I don't really, I'll see what happens. I noticed people started getting sicker. So I don't know if that's, true or not, but, there's a lot of concerns and certainly a lack of transparency. And I think people all around the world have a lot of resentment towards that. So we don't want to start just kind of turning away from medicine. We don't want to start demonizing science and medicine. So we want to have more transparency so that we can address these things in a very real way. And certainly Africa deals with these things, and it's important for the global community to continue to invest in protecting against these things, but doing it in a more upfront, forthright way. And this is where simple things, going back to God, makes it very easy. Being transparent is a requirement. If you're not transparent, you're not in communion. So if you're not in communion, you're not doing something correct. That's for me kind of my mechanism. If I'm doing something that's wrong, okay, well then I don't get to get that. So I need to get back in line. So when we just apply those basic principles of, hey, should we be misleading people and thinking that we're the only ones that need to know what's going on? No, that's not good. We got to get on the same page. We got to address this thing. We need to invest more in healthcare. Water is a very legitimate concern, especially in places like Africa, famine, stuff like that. So kind of getting in there as a global community and addressing these things is going to help everybody long term, because these are problems that we have to fix. We do have to address, fossil fuels and these types of things. Now, how quickly, what pace, that's a different question. But we do have a planet here that we've got to watch over. And the way that we've been consuming animals, the way that we've been treating them, just the way that we've been really terrorizing the planet is not consistent with what God intended for us when he put us in this place. So it's not, and it gets put into this, which way is it? And it's not Gaia worship. I mean, the planet isn't like a living, it's not like it's God put us here to watch over this garden. And we've done a poor job of that. Done a good job of protecting ourselves and giving us lots of buttons and gadgets and things to play with. But in terms of creating a godly environment that is conducive to harmonized life. My gosh, I'm getting a little bit confused here. But in terms of having a nice, harmonious environment and a place where families and wilderness and animals and everything can work and go together, that's where we want to be going back to. We want to be looking back. We always want to be looking back to the Garden of Eden and recognizing it's outside of us to completely restore that place. But that's got to be the direction that we're trying to take this thing. We're going the opposite direction. So Africa is a great place to roll up our sleeves and address these things. And that will help us craft technologies, lifestyles, attitudes, and tempos that will have obviously positive resonating effects as we project the same back here at home and into the rest of the world.
Thanks for your insights, Daryl Constantine. Now, so I'd like you to talk a bit about what is going on in your political campaign or ambition lately.
Yeah, it's not going well at all. I mean, I've been completely shut out of the conversation. I understand why. I mean, this was always a concern because I'm a threat. I'm a very dangerous candidate, not only to the Republicans, but also the Democrats. I'm also the only Republican that's willing to take the fight to Donald Trump in an effective way. I guess I should say there are some people that are willing, but they're not really, they're out to lunch. It's guys like Chris Christie, they're doing it for different reasons. But I'm the only legitimate, strong social conservative that wants to take the fight to Trump. DeSantis doesn't want to do that. He's not capable of doing it, and he's mealy-mouthed. He likes to talk tough and point to little cherry-picking examples of things that he does. But when it comes down to it, He's really not offering anything different, and he's really not making the real case that needs to be made against Donald Trump. So I'm a real threat to the Republican establishment, and I'm also a threat to the Democrat establishment because I'm very unorthodox. I'm completely different from Republicans from the past, and there's a tremendous amount of overlap that I posit the only candidate from both sides that is really in a position to bring the country together, to actually end this social war, to end this gridlock and move the nation forward. So, I've always said, put me on the stage and I'm going to clobber him. I'm going to go out. I mean, I can't, that's an arrogant thing to say. It's up to God who wins, but that's my mindset. My mindset is put me on the stage and let me go. But they won't do that. They won't put me on the stage. They're keeping me out. They've done a very good job of keeping me out of the conversation. At the same time, I've got responsibility for that. It's my campaign. I'm the guy that's responsible. So I obviously haven't done enough either. So it's very frustrating, but that is the status of my campaign. The status of my campaign is it's essentially non-existent at this point. So I've got to look in the mirror. I've got to sort of redouble my efforts and get back in there. Time is certainly running out. We got a couple of months left here, and it's not looking good. So, I've always had this strong sense of optimism, but we've got to get there, and we haven't succeeded in breaking down that barrier yet. And I think it's unfortunate because I think that Republicans are setting themselves up again for failure, whether they win or lose. And this is, nobody's better than Republicans at winning elections, but losing the culture. And I kind of, part of what I did too is I didn't want to listen too much to these guys because I like to have my own pure mindset, and I don't like to be influenced necessarily by what other contemporaries are thinking. So they had the first debate, and I go, okay, I should probably watch this. I'll see what's going on. And sure enough, it's exactly what I expected. I mean, I had my head in the sand for 5 years, and the conversation's gone nowhere. It's the same that it's been for the last 20 years. We've got new fast talkers up there, but it's the same. It's just Reaganomics, and just not that there's anything wrong with that, but they're not moving in a winning direction. Whether they go with Trump or if Trump collapses and it falls to one of these other guys, it's really the same very weak agenda that is just not capable of fixing the problems facing the nation. And they're still tone deaf on issues like gun control and healthcare. They still don't want to talk about those topics in a frank and honest manner. So, I'm doing this to save the Republicans from themselves. I'm doing this to save them from just continued decomposition and collapse, and presiding over a base that is increasingly on the outside looking in on the culture, on the main street, on the norm. And, at the same time, I'm also doing it to save the Democrats. I'm looking to save things that working class people care about, like healthcare, like minimum wage, like jobs, and saving them from these very bizarre set of values that the Democrats have attached to them, such as pushing the sodomite lifestyle on children. So it's an opportunity for both sides to let go of the things that aren't working and come forward. And naturally, the establishment doesn't want that. It really likes to stand up there and say, I'm running an insurgent candidacy, but nobody actually wants to do it. Well, this is what it is. This is what a guy running on his own ideas looks like. And unfortunately, the powers that be are very good at keeping that type of conversation out. But again, it's all comes back to me. It's incumbent upon me to do more. And coming back on here with you is very exciting. You're my favorite interview. I don't know if you know that, but my interview is my favorite interview. So come back with you is very exciting for me, and hopefully, do more of these. And I partnered up with, got referred to some people, and they turned out to be crooks and scumbags. So I had to cut them off, and I'm just going to go back to doing what I do. And whether 10 people or 1,000, it's largely out of my control. But I do have this antenna on the back of my head, sticks up in the morning, and it is able to get struck by lightning at any given time. So my godly responsibility is to continue to stand in the arena for as long as there's time on the clock, and hoop up, throw the ball at the basket. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm going to continue to do it until, as I said, the clock strikes zero. So.
Thanks once again, Daryl Constantine, for sharing your thoughts. I really wish you best of luck in your political.
Thank you. I like your new haircut, by the way. I mean, I like the old one too, but you look very nice. Thank you very much. And say hi to Shirley for me, okay?
All right. Wish you best of luck once again. Now, if you'd like to catch up with any missed episodes of The Backstory, you can do so on any cross-promotion platforms that you bump into online, and do have a great time listening to experts and professionals share their thoughts on topics or subjects on the government and politics. Till I come your way, I need you to stay safe. I talk soon.
God bless you. Have a good one.
And you too.
Thank you.